All right, so before I get into the story, though, I'll tell you a little bit about my company, so that you have the context for what we were building. So we're Manta, and as you can see from the tagline, we're a place for small business. And we're at our roots, we're a small business directory, and we are all about helping small businesses reach out to people, to promote themselves, to connect with one another, and for consumers to find small business. So the numbers, so you know, again, for context, so you know what kind of scale we're working at. It's not going to be at the scale that a lot of the talks are about, but decent size for an Ohio company. So we have 20 million unique visitors a month, 1,000 small businesses join every day, 4.5 million registered users, and only about 60 employees. So what does that really matter to you? Why do you care what Manta is? Well, the important piece of what Manta is for this talk is how we make a big portion of our money. So we have a lot of company profiles on our site, right? So that's the highest traffic page that we have. Also, to monetize, the way that we monetize the traffic is through advertising. And over the years, we've gotten really, really good at making the ad work through better targeting, through better display, and we've just tuned it to death over the years. So that was really important. That you'll see that play in later in the story. So now I'll tell you the story about how speed kills. So we had the chance to start from scratch. About end of last year, we ended up deciding that we would pause feature development for a little while, or mostly pause feature development for a while, and focus on rebuilding the whole platform from scratch. The main purposes were to mainly reduce technical debt, and then also, as we could, improve performance. And we're developers, we got new toys, and we said, how many of them can we take? Well, we'll take all of them. So we did everything from the infrastructure to the front end, and to how we worked. So we ended up choosing things like CloudFormation, using Ubuntu on EC2s, CloudFront for our CDN. Now I'm going to make a lot of people angry here because we're using all AWS, and there's so many other CDNs. So then for our services, we use Java Play and Node.js. We use Node.js with Express and Hogan.js for our server-side web app. We're using AngularJS for our client-side apps. We have a customized version of Twitter Bootstrap that we forked, and which comes with docs, which is awesome. So afterwards, if you want to talk about that, I could talk an hour on just documentation on Bootstrap. So we also use Kibana for centralized logging, Datadog for metrics, Travis CI, and Jenkins for tests. Like I said, we adopted test-driven development, continuous integration, and continuous delivery, all for this one little project. So it was quite a ride. So of course, we were really excited. We had all our new toys to play with. But let me give you a quick rundown of what we were using so that you really understand how excited we were. So we were in a single data center, and we had Perl as our web app. We started in the 90s. So we like to say that we had HTML and CSS that grew organically over many years. And actually, just the other day, we found out someone did some analysis on the CSS from the old compared to the new, and the old had 200 times more CSS. 200. And of course, we had custom solutions for JavaScript solutions for everything from client-side apps to how we do asynchronous ad serving. And of course, no tests for any of that, so that was fun. And releasing twice a day, and somehow kept the site up. So let's look at how the speed differences between the old and the new real quick. So this chart here is going to show you, in the blue, how long it basically took for the initial content to show up. Then the red is how much longer it then took for the AdSense unit to show up, which is the text unit in the page. And then yellow being the rest of the display ads, how much longer did it take for those to show. And as you can see, the one on the bottom is quite a bit shorter, so that was good. So we were pumped about that. And then, but we thought what was even better was this difference here. So the gray arrows there are showing you the difference in when all of the content on the page, aside from the ads, was visible. And so you can see as soon as the initial content was there, it's visible. On the new site. On the old, it was sort of delayed until after the AdSense was there. So I'll show you that a little bit better later. So this is looking, now we didn't know this at the time, this is looking back now that we're 6 months past that. We've been rolling out different pages. So we started with the most trafficked page, which is the company profile, because we wanted to make sure that we built the platform for the thing that was important, right? So we didn't want to build it wrong and get to the end and go, oh, we can't support our page that gets 80% of our traffic. So we did that, and we started releasing things over time. And so this is shows this is from Google Analytics, and it shows the average time to page download, or average time to download. And you can see on the left side we hadn't released anything yet, and these yellow arrows are pointing to each release. And you can see the first one drops and gets more stable, second one drops some more and gets more stable, and then third it drops again. So as we released more pieces of the site, you can see that Google Analytics is showing us that indeed it is affecting users. So we looked at this data and we were super excited, right? I mean, why wouldn't doing that make more money? I was here last year, been to OSCON, and people have talked about similar things there. You read everything online, and of course you make pages faster and you make more money. So we launched an A/B test, and what we found was, the new page that was twice as fast from all measurements we could take was twice as fast, but made 17% less money. So of course, after we recovered from the shock of that, we went to testing, and more testing. So we let some part of the team go off to continue building the rest of the site on this new infrastructure, while a couple of us hung back to figure out what was going on and make sure that when they were done with all that, we'd be ready to launch. So we did lots of different kinds of tests, right? So we did everything from layout tests to speed tests, basically like how each component worked on the page. So this is going to be an example of one of the layout tests that we did. And so this is version A. So version A, version B. You can see the difference there, right? A, B. Do you see the content moving a little bit at the bottom? Does anyone want to take a guess at what that did to the page? Like what did it do to the revenue? Anyone? Nothing. Good guess? 5%. Yeah. So if you ever think, is it worth testing this thing? Yeah, it's worth testing. Because you can see it's a 1 pixel change between the spacing between the ad and the content below, 5%. So here's the next version was, this is going to be an example of the more ad performance type test that we did. So I'm not showing it here, but I want to say it because it's interesting. So one of the tests that we did, actually let me do this one first. So this is the page that we launched with first, and we said, look at this is amazing, we can deliver all the content there for the user, and then the ads show up when they show up, right? And we thought that was awesome, way better user experience, of course. And then, so version B, we tried to simulate what the old site was doing, and it did inline blocking scripts that rendered each ad. So you'd end up with this. So you request the page, you get this, you wait for a while, ad shows up and gives you some more content, wait a little more for the next ad, and then it shows up, and then the rest of the content can be shown. So we went from this nice experience to this slower experience. Anybody want to guess what that did? I'm not going to tell you anyway. It was sad. Very sad. So it did go up, though. And we were actually, unfortunately, still, luckily, we're at the end of migration, so we can fix this now, I hope. But we're still actually using a faster version of that sad ads implementation. When we launched the test, we called it the sad ads treatment. So it's still out there. But so during that last test, I was just talking to someone, and I had started telling them about this test that we were running, and I said, we found out that if you delay the page content by a second, you can make more money. And so they thought about it for a minute, and I said, why do you care if it's 1 second slower if you make some more money? So which I said, are you kidding me? It's 1,000 milliseconds. All right, so so as you saw before, a lot of our time was waiting on the AdSense units that you saw there. So we waited, spent a lot of time just waiting for that to happen. And so we had to come up with a couple of ways to try and make that faster, because we had already attacked the display ads, because we basically we switched to using GPT, and that solved all our problems. Had a custom iframe solution that was making them asynchronous before, but GPT has a lot of nice features that makes them even faster. So that was a fairly easy improvement there. And excuse me. And then so we had already tackled the display ads for the most part, and we wanted to focus on the AdSense ad because it was by far the slowest thing on the page at that point. And even and if you see, yeah, I won't go back and show you. Anyway, if you remember the way the content loaded, it was blocking at each of those things because custom.js AdSense happens to be do document rights, and it's not cool. So anyway, so we wanted to attack that one first. So I just wanted to check, raise a hand. Who here uses ads on their site? Okay, pretty good. Who uses AdSense on their site? Okay, not that many. All right, and I'm going to guess it's 0. How many of you use the custom.js version of AdSense on your site? Oh, all right, nice. Got 2 right there. All right. So this is to show you what custom.js AdSense is if you don't know what it is. So I guess first I should step back and say what AdSense is, because so it looks like not all of you used it. So AdSense is it's a Google product, and basically you can go and you put some AdSense code on your page, and it will go off and figure out what your page is about, render some ads in the spot that you want it to be, right? And it's typically text tags. They have image ads as well, but usually when you're talking about AdSense, it's this format. So this is the standard format. You can do things to it, like pick different sizes. I think you could even change link color a little bit. But this is the standard one. Now the custom one for us looks like this. Right. So So you can't just make it however you want it to look. You have to work pretty closely with Google to make sure that it's in their guidelines. You're not doing anything shady. Meets all their link color requirements and all that normal stuff. So and we get a big improvement from going from this to this, right? As you saw before, 1 pixel can make 5%. So as you can imagine, this makes a big difference. So I'll go into a little bit just to show you what the custom.js configuration looks like. So when you're setting up your page, you're first going to do something like this and say, so the first 2 lines there are just saying it's the custom.js version, and I want the text ads instead of image or something else. And then we're going to also define what the keyword of the page is about, so which is actually an extra beta on top of the custom.js thing. So basically, instead of having Google determine what your page is about, we'd say this is a used car page, right? And so they'll try and serve ads related to that. And then after that, you just say, I'd like to have 1 or 2 or 3 ads in this unit. Right. So this is what your HTML will look like. So you have a little bit of, some text at the top. You have a script tag, which I mentioned is a blocking script tag, and it does document writes out a couple script tags and iframes, and eventually comes back to tell you what the ad is. Some more content, maybe you have a second one, and some more content. So the show ads.js there, after it's done doing everything it needs to do to figure out what ad to show, instead of rendering it like most ad providers might do, they actually call this callback here, the Google Ad Request Done function, so you have to define it. And so this is the worst possible implementation of the Google Ads callback. And so, of course, you're just looping over the number of ads, and you're writing out the HTML with document rights, because why not? It does document rights too. So you go through this, so you can see you're writing out the link with the text and the URL and the description of the ad and all that stuff. And there's also more stuff that you would really do around it to do attribution and stuff like that, but this is the simplified version. So that brings me to the AdSense trick number 1, which is called single request mode and deferred-ish. If you look back to that AdSense configuration again, we're going to change one line to say, instead of asking for 1 ad, we're going to ask for 2. Right? So we're saying the maximum ads is 2. And then we're going to update our HTML to look like this. So the highlights there show where the script tags used to be. Now we've said, let's put some placeholder divs there, and we'll put the script tag at the bottom of the page so that the rest of the content can show. And next, we're going back to our callback again, and the only thing that you need to do there is to change, again, 1 line, although we actually use Angular for rendering Angular templates, which is a much nicer way to do it, but for the example here. So we're just going to change that 1 line to say, use jQuery to say, insert this ad at this index into the placeholder divs that we had before. So that makes it really nice so that you can do it in one request. So you've cut your time in half, and it's also lets the rest of the content load, which is much nicer. Although we're not getting around it right now. So what's the catch? So two things. So first is that the max number ads really does mean max. We found out this. Next, I'll be talking about how you track this kind of stuff, and we found out that it really is max. So you're saying, can I have a max of 2, please? And Google might say, yes, you may, or here's 1, or here's none. They rarely do the here's none unless it's targeting for something that they don't have anything for, which is kind of rare. But you might ask, why would they ever not return 2? If you're asking for 2, shouldn't you just display 2? You'd make more money. Well, it turns out there's probably many reasons they do that, but one of the main ones is that imagine you're asking for 2 ads in the same unit space, like same space, right? So you want to add 1, then add 2 right underneath it. That's how you typically use this stuff. So they might if they give you back 2 ads, and imagine that the first ad was saying, you know what, I will pay $5 for this click if someone clicks on it, and it's the BMW dealer, right? Now the second ad that would have filled the second slot is Joe's Used Cars, and he says I'll pay 25 cents per click. Now if Google said here they are, here's your $5.25 one, you're essentially cutting your cost per click in half, right? Because if your second one's on the 25 cents and there's a good chance that someone might click on that one instead, then when they do click, you've just lost $5 essentially. So that's why they will pick and choose which ones they turn back. And of course, as always, as our test showed earlier, when you defer the ad loading till after the content is there, it's going to be much slower, and so your users are able to do things without the ads. So that's important, but also affects revenue as well. So during all these tests, we had to basically figure out if we could track this better, because we weren't just changing the layout. We weren't just changing how we displayed the ads. We were changing everything from top to bottom, right? Like I said, infrastructure to server-side code to services to front-end to CSS, right? So we changed everything. So we couldn't just say, we couldn't do the pixel testing that we did earlier. We have to say, we have to really understand what's going on with it. And so we wanted to see several things. We wanted to know, are we displaying ads? Are we requesting the right kind of ads still? Because the targeting is very important for how we make our money. And if that's not right, then revenue is going to be down. And so we need to be able to track basically everything that's going on with the stack that makes up the ads. For example, the targeting alone is done by 3 services have to work together to make that happen. So if they're not all working, then there's going to be issues. So for tracking them, right before we call our blocking script tag, we'll just implement this function that says track AdSense request. And for these examples, I'm going to be using Google Analytics, so hopefully you're somewhat familiar with that. So we implement that function to first record the time that we're starting, and then it just adds a track event method. And what it does then is so if you're not, so I'll describe what this is quickly if you're not familiar with Google Analytics events. So there's the event category. Basically, it's a hierarchy. So you have the event category, the event action, and the event label. So what we're saying here is that the event action is an category is an AdSense category. Of course, AdSense is the action. So we're asking for AdSense. So if you think about it, we're going to ask for it. They're going to give it back to us, and then we're going to render it. Right? So we're asking for it first. We're also tracking here so that we can figure out if the targeting is working appropriately across these 3 services, that they make it work, and that it's actually getting to where it needs to get to. We record in the event label the keyword that we're using to target. So we're also recording the max number of ads here. You might say, why would you bother doing that? Well, for us, not every page is the same, right? So AdSense on a search result page, you might have a single unit, and on the profile, you might have 2. Also, between devices, we might show more or less depending on your screen size. And lastly, there the true at the end there, which is very descriptive, makes it a non-interactive event, which helps you keep from. If we didn't do that, what would happen is just by seeing an ad, your page views per visit would go up and your bounce rate would go down, right? So you don't want that affecting those kinds of numbers. Or I guess you do if you want to fluff your numbers up, but we don't. So we've made the request. We know now we can decide, are we, oh, actually I wanted to mention. So one thing that we found so with just this part of the tracking, one early thing that we found and helped us recover from the 17% down that you saw earlier was just that those three services that I was talking about, well, one of them, one of the requests, the one that takes the two others and makes ad targeting out of it, it was timing out some of the time, right? So it wasn't enough that we noticed it, but it was timing out often enough that it was affecting the numbers. And so we were able to see that through this tracking, we were able to see that we were, instead of getting back good keywords, we were getting back default keywords or no keywords at all. And so that's how we noticed that, and then we fixed the bottleneck and got back to normal. So, which also leads me to, if you make things non-fatal, make sure someone knows about it, because otherwise you end up having to realize it through tests like this. So we're going to display the ad now. So again, we have our callback function there, and I took renders ads, added the renders ad there, so we don't have to look at the code that we were looking at earlier. We also added in the track AdSense display call, which just passes in the ads. And ignore the average time thing at the top for a minute. I'll come back to that. But it's going to be similar to how we're displaying them, right? So it's going to loop through them and track each one of them. But an important thing here is that instead of doing Google Ads, instead of looking at Google Ads.length for your iterator, we're going to look at the Google maximum ads. So instead of how many we get back, we're going to say how many did we actually ask for. And in the case of where we don't get one back, right, we'll add the bid type of none and so on so that we can track that we're missing some. And the reason for that, I'm glad that we happened to think about it, because we also found that that we don't get the second ad 23% of the time. So it's actually pretty significant. But what we did find, though, is that it's the revenue is pretty much a wash, or maybe a little bit higher, even though it's 23% of the time you're not getting the second ad unit, because it's slower on the page and it doesn't get clicked as often anyway. And the added, basically doubling your speed, so you make it back that way. So we're going to call our track ad method. So when you get back an ad from Google Custom JS AdSense, you get a couple of things. You get a bid type, so that's going to be something like CPC versus CPM, or cost per click versus cost per 1,000 impressions. And we'll default it if they don't tell us. Targeting is going to be, so you can have three kinds. There's basically site targeting, which means someone said, hey, I want to show up on Manta. I don't care what the page is about. I just want to be on Manta. Then there's going to be behavioral targeting as well, which is more about, or interest-based targeting, right? So you're on the web, and I was on the Velocity site a lot, so I saw a lot of Velocity AdSense ads showing up. And then there's also contextual. So if you say the ad's about used cars, well, then it's going to show something related to that. And then the ad title as well. So we're tracking, then the action is display AdSense, and we're tracking which slot it's in, so we can keep track of that, and how often each one of them doesn't show up, or what type is showing up in each. Then we're also tracking those things that I mentioned earlier, so the ad title, targeting, and bid type as well. And again, so we chose the average time here, as well as the event value. So if you look in Google Analytics, you can pass in events and give them values. So last time we did the number of ads we requested, so we can see what the average number of ads we request on a page. And here we displayed the average time, which led us to some interesting results, so I'll reveal those later. And we chose the average time because we basically didn't want to double count. So we're making two events, right? So if you show two ads, you're going to fire two events. We didn't really want to double count the time it took to get the ads, so we're basically just saying, if you're asking for two, let's split the cost of that across the two. All right. So the thing that we found, so after adding this tracking, we realized that the custom JS AdSense is way, way slower than we ever thought it would be. It actually takes a little over a second for Google to respond with an ad, which is kind of sad. So if you're on the AdSense team, please come talk to me after this, because we should fix that. So about the same time that we Okay, sorry. About the same time that we were launching these extra event tracking, we also turned on demographics inside of Google Analytics, which you should definitely do if you haven't yet. It's interesting stuff. And we have a lot, enough users that it is really interesting. So of course, the first thing that I did since I just added this event tracking was to say, hey, I wonder what happened. Like, what does the demographics look like for ads, and how's it impact? So since I think I still have enough time, so I'm going to reveal a couple of. So we I went back and looked at like what kinds of ads are being shown, and who interacts with them and why. So and I broke it down and say, let's just look at male versus female. So I was going to do this as a little bit of a game to say, if you can guess what it did, then I'll buy you a beer later. But since there's so much free beer, you can cash it in for something of equal or lesser value, whatever that might be. All right, so the ad by electronic components. Does anybody want to take a guess at what the male-female correlation was there? Male? All right, yeah. Anything more specific? Percentage or ratio? 99? All right, I'll get you a beer. It's actually only shown to men. So, job openings. This is a little less obvious, but anyone take a guess at what this might be? Anyone? Free $5 right here. 70% male? Okay, like being shown. Okay, so this was actually one about click-through rates. So, what do you think that might have affected? All right, I'll go away. 25% higher click-through rate by women. So women work harder, I think is what that's saying. So Hoover's in Salesforce. Anyone want to guess at how they advertise to men versus women? All right, I'm drinking the beer by myself. So both of them actually advertise twice as much to men than they do to women. And I'm actually not sure if that's because of the kind of person they advertise to happens to be male on our site or if something else, but I thought that was interesting. And then my personal favorite was the maps and directions one. Can anybody imagine what this might be? All right. So it's offered to men twice as often and accepted by them half as much. All right. So in summary, faster doesn't always mean more money because it depends where you get your money from, right? But for us, what that really meant is don't leave your ads behind. I think what I didn't mention earlier, and I meant to, was that if you looked at if you took a stopwatch and started when you requested the page and then stopped it when you got all the ads, the new site was, with the deferred and everything, new site was still faster by a lot. But the old site, but the content had gotten faster by a bigger ratio than the ads themselves. So even though they were still getting them faster, right? So if we recorded that somewhere that, hey, we're delivering ads twice as fast now, it just wasn't true for the user perception. So it still felt like it was slower. So don't leave your ads behind. It's the main goal there. Again, non-fatal errors without alerting is dangerous. There's no such thing as a stupid test, so you saw the 5% change from 1 pixel. And Google, please make custom ads faster. So since this was my first talk and I've never done this before and I didn't know what the timing would be like, the hardest part of it all was to actually whittle down what I would talk about because we did so much during this migration that it was really hard to focus in on what would I actually talk about. So I picked what I thought was semi-interesting and the less here. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be around. If you want to grab a beer or meet somewhere else, any of these topics interest you, just stop by. So thank you. Do you have time for questions? Yeah, okay. Questions? Right here?
How has AdBlock affected the tracking?
That's funny that you asked that. I was just looking into that this week. Oh, I'm sorry. He said, how does AdBlock affect your tracking? That's a very good question. Like I said, I was looking at it just earlier this week because there was a patch recently to AdBlock that fixed the blocking of the AdSense on the new platform of Manta. So I happen to be looking at that. And the way that they blocked it this time affects it in that it inflates our views, I guess, because it's still rendering it and stuff. It used to be that it would just block it completely, but now since the content is dependent on it, they aren't doing that anymore. And so so in our case, it's inflating the tracking. Okay.
I know another big company that had similar discoveries with their ads. But one thing they noticed was when they made the ads async, basically load later, after more content was visible, their ad revenue dropped, but their other user metrics went up, like session length, page views per session, revisits. Did you track any of those metrics? And if so, how did they correlate?
Yes, we absolutely did, and we would have loved if those were much higher, and we would have tried to figure out some trade-off there. So I guess another thing I should mention is that the way that we do our A/B testing is so like I said, when we launched this test, it was just the company profile, and so the search results and the browse and the member profiles and everything else was still exactly the same on the old platform. We just replaced that one page. But when you hit the page, you get cookied, and then it sort of tracks with you throughout. So we were looking at the full duration of your visit and how much money we made off of you, essentially. And so it wasn't just, is this one page better, but is this page. So what our hypothesis was, well, we made it faster, but delayed the ads, but they'll view more pages and therefore make up for it in the end, right? And we didn't see that during the initial test. And if you want, we can talk more about that after, because it's kind of a long discussion. So one thing is that a lot of our traffic is one and done. So they come in, get the phone number, get the whatever, and they're out. And so it's hard to move that number a lot, even with faster pages. But for those sections of the site that are more interactive, it does help a lot, I think. Yeah. Anybody else?
So it wouldn't be 100%, but I would think a significant amount of this surprising behavior is from quick click-throughs, where, for example, if the ads are a little delayed, people are clicking on a link in the page before the ads load. Or vice versa, if the ads are loading quicker than the content, they're clicking perhaps on an ad before they actually see the page content.
Yep.
In both cases, there's not going to be an onload event. And so I believe Google Analytics will not send a beacon. I don't think they send a beacon in the on before unload. And so did you do anything? Do you know about that? Did you somehow have a way of tracking people leaving the page before the page had actually finished loading and maybe had gathered the analytics?
So you said basically, since the Google Analytics code doesn't fire until the onload, did we lose tracking on the people that were there, essentially? And so yes, we did. But the thing with our tests was that the AdSense tracking itself, we did in two places, right? So it's integrated. Google Analytics integrates AdSense into Analytics, which is not the same numbers that you'll see in the AdSense dashboard. And so we also double-checked on the dashboard and saw the same kinds of results. And so we were pretty confident in that. We were losing some, but it was enough that I think we were happy with the result. Well, we were unhappy with the results, but confident in the results. Okay. Well, any more, Steve? Or anybody else? Okay, one over here.
So, I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't hear the final result. I mean, did you end up just slowing down or just making everything synchronous?
Yeah, good question. So we said, what was the final result? Did you do the bad thing and just slow everything down? Kind of. So we got a lot of benefits by doing a single request versus a double request, right? So that helps speed things up. But we didn't. So we're at the end of the migration. So now's the time that we're going to go back and try and address that. But basically, yeah, we did that slow load thing that you said. We made it at the bottom of the page still, but we emulate the slow load, the synchronous load, and then we. Anyway, so we sped that part up. So it's like the other one, but it's faster. And we're going to go back and try see if we can test our way out of that as well. And also, we haven't applied that to other pages because they're not as impacted by it as well, just that one page. Good? All right, well, thank you.